It happened while you were asleep, not during some late-night Senate vote or an oil spill in the Gulf. This was something different, quieter, sharper, more surgical. A fully loaded LNG tanker carrying billions in strategic energy slipped silently away from British Columbia. Not to Boston, not to Houston, but straight across the Pacific. That ship didn't just change course, it changed history. For the first time in over 30 years, Canadian gas bypassed every inch of U.S. soil. No pipelines crossing the border, no American customs oversight or fingerprints, just clean, hydro-powered, liquefied gas sailing straight to Asia. In Washington, the news hit like a sledgehammer. Inside the Oval Office, former President Donald Trump reportedly slammed his desk in rage. And for good reason. For decades, America had quietly assumed control over North America's energy map. Pipelines, tariffs, trade routes all drawn in red, white, and blue. But on June 30th, 2025, that map was shredded. The headlines called it a pivot. The analysts called it a decoupling. But make no mistake, this was a declaration of independence, and not by a small struggling nation clawing for survival. By Canada. Your quiet northern neighbor, the one no one saw coming. This isn't just about gas, it's about power. Who has it? Who's losing it? And how one country quietly rewrote the rules while another was still reading from an outdated playbook. For decades, the playbook was simple. Canada drilled, America transported, both profited. The border didn't just connect two economies, it locked them in. But by mid-2025, that lock was shattered. At the heart of the shift, LNG Canada, a $40 billion mega-project constructed in silence over 3 years. Located in Kitimat, British Columbia, the terminal turns natural gas into liquid at 162 degrees and compresses it 600 times. Then it's loaded directly onto ocean-bound tankers. No pipelines to Texas, no customs stops in Michigan. No reliance on Gulf Coast terminals. Canada, for the first time in modern history, was exporting energy independently, strategically, and surgically. The first shipment, the gas log Glasgow, headed east to Japan. Not a drop of that gas touched American soil. And that was no accident. This wasn't diversification. This was bypass. Back in Washington, fury turned to panic. Trump reacted in typical fashion, swiftly, loudly, and with tariffs. A 10% duty on all Canadian energy exports to the U.S. was imposed overnight. But it was already too late. Canada had moved first. The deals were inked, the ships were loaded, the route was mapped. Within 72 hours of the first launch, Japan pledged to increase Canadian LNG imports by 20 million tons annually starting in 2026. China followed with its own long-term contracts just days later. What began as a logistics story became a full-blown geopolitical reordering. America had built the infrastructure, the trade networks, and the dominance. But in 2025, it forgot to build foresight. And Canada used that oversight to execute its own escape. The ripples spread quickly. In New England, where over half of winter energy comes from Canada, heating prices surged. Utility companies scrambled to renegotiate supply terms. Dan Dolan, president of the Regional Electricity Producers Association, sounded the alarm households would see it in their heaters at the pump and on their next bill. And there was no quick fix. The U.S. lacked the infrastructure to replace Canadian gas at scale. Gulf Coast LNG unstable. Texas grid insecurity, wildfires, and hurricanes. Meanwhile, Kitimat stood strong, a fortress of ESG principles. Its liquefaction units were powered by hydroelectricity, not diesel. Its carbon intensity was among the world's lowest. And in a world chasing low-carbon energy that mattered a lot, Asian buyers were no longer just buying gas, they were buying a climate narrative. By July, South Korea expanded its LNG storage capacity by 50%. China inked new deals bypassing Qatar and the U.S. altogether. Canada's combination of clean energy political stability and Indigenous equity participation was unmatched. Even more ironic, the low-emission compressors and carbon monitors powering Kitimat's advantage made in the United States. While America shouted tariffs, Canada delivered trust. And in today's energy market, trust is the new currency. Then came Doug Ford's statement. If the U.S. keeps playing tariff games, maybe Canada cuts off electricity exports too. That wasn't just posturing. Quebec powers much of the northeastern U.S. grid. Pull that plug and the lights go out in Boston. America's leverage was vanishing, and fast. This isn't just about gas. It's a blueprint for the future. One ship changed the game, but it was just the beginning. A second liquefaction unit is already under construction in Kitimat, set to double capacity to 28 million tons annually. With it, Canada will overtake Nigeria and rival Australia in LNG exports. And it's doing it with a model no one else can replicate: green energy, Indigenous equity, political transparency, and stable infrastructure. This isn't a pivot, it's a statement. While America preaches energy independence, Canada practices it. While Washington struggles to punish China, Ottawa builds an energy bridge that makes Asian dependence on Russian and Middle Eastern gas obsolete. And now the world is watching. The European Union is finalizing its carbon border tax. Japan and South Korea are planning similar models. That means dirtier gas, especially from unstable grids like Texas, will be taxed at the port. But Canada, with its hydropowered LNG, it becomes the new global gold standard. Still, this moment is fragile. Kitimat. Phase 2 needs over $15 billion in investment. Construction delays, environmental pushback, Indigenous consultation. All of it matters. One misstep and the narrative crumbles. But if Canada succeeds, it won't just lead in energy, it will lead in how energy is done. Fair, transparent, green. And that's the new standard. Can the future be ethical and profitable? Let's be clear, Canada didn't shut the door on the United States. It simply stopped depending on it. And that is what hurts the most. Because for the first time in modern history, the energy roadmap for North America isn't being drawn in D.C. It's sailing east from Kitimat. This isn't just about pipelines. It's about pride, control, direction, and values. The global demand for ethical energy is exploding. Buyers ask, where is this gas from? Who profits? Who suffers? And on those questions, Canada now has an answer. But other players are coming: Mozambique, Mauritania, Cyprus, with promises of lower cost, faster builds, fewer regulations. Canada's edge is real, but it's not permanent. The clock is ticking. By 2030, renewables and hydrogen may redefine energy again. Canada has 5 years to prove that clean, inclusive, profitable energy isn't a dream. It's a model. The next chapter is being written now, ship by ship, deal by deal. And it all started with one decision not to ask for permission. So we ask you, will America adapt or be left behind? Can Canada stay ahead without compromise? And is it finally time the world demands more from its energy? Let us know in the comments. The world is watching, and so are we. In the world of global energy, dominance is rarely declared through loud proclamations. It is earned through planning, trust, and bold decisions. In 2025, Canada quietly rewrote the rules of North American energy without a single vote in Congress, without a formal press conference, and without asking permission from the United States. For decades, the relationship between Canada and the United States followed a predictable script. Canada extracted the natural gas, and the United States transported and traded it. American infrastructure was the only route, and U.S. oversight was the norm. Billions of dollars flowed through this arrangement, benefiting both sides, but always keeping Canada in a junior role. That changed with one ship. On June 30th, 2025, an LNG tanker called the Gaslog Glasgow sailed from Kitimat, British Columbia, straight to Japan. It bypassed all U.S. pipelines, customs, and influence. This was not a logistical rerouting, it was a declaration. Canada had invested $40 billion in its own liquefaction and shipping infrastructure built over 3 years with partners like Shell and Mitsubishi. The project was powered by hydroelectric energy and designed with environmental, social, and governance principles at its core. The reaction from Washington was swift but ineffective. Former President Donald Trump imposed a 10% tariff on all Canadian energy exports. But Canada had already signed long-term contracts with Japan, China, and South Korea. The ships were sailing and the deals were locked. The tariffs only confirmed what was already clear: the United States had been outmaneuvered. The consequences were immediate and widespread. In the northeastern United States, states like Maine and Vermont saw heating and electricity prices spike. The American infrastructure was not ready to replace Canadian imports. Meanwhile, Canada gained recognition for offering not just energy but clean energy. Kitimat's hydro-powered LNG was suddenly the gold standard in a world that increasingly values low-carbon solutions. The shift was not just technical, it was philosophical. Canada embedded Indigenous equity into the project. Over 50,000 jobs were created, and billions in contracts were awarded to local and First Nations communities. Transparency, legal governance, and climate responsibility were not marketing slogans, they were structural pillars of the project. In a global market filled with corruption, emissions, and political instability, this was rare and valuable. But this rise did not come without irony. Many of the technologies used in Kitimat low-emission compressors, carbon monitoring systems were developed in the United States. In attempting to lead the world, the U.S. had unwittingly built the tools that helped Canada break free. This raises an important lesson in a globalized world. Power does not only come from control, it comes from credibility. While the U.S. continued to rely on older, more polluting systems vulnerable to weather and political shocks, Canada offered a different vision. One based on long-term planning, environmental integrity, and diplomatic trust. This was not just energy strategy, it was national strategy. The lesson for other countries is simple. Clean infrastructure is not just good for the planet, it is good for business. Trust is not just a moral ideal, it is a market advantage. And independence is not about isolation. It is about building systems that reduce risk, enhance resilience, and attract partners who value consistency. But Canada's journey is not complete. The next phase of Kitimat requires over $15 billion. New projects like Cedar LNG must be executed with precision. Global competition is rising. Countries like Mauritania and Mozambique are racing to offer cheaper, faster alternatives. Canada's lead is real, but it is not permanent. There are also internal tensions. Some provinces question the federal subsidies. Activists raise concerns about environmental trade-offs. Indigenous communities demand a fair share of long-term profits. Canada must continue to balance economic ambition with social responsibility. That is difficult but necessary. In a world that often sees energy as a weapon or a commodity, Canada has positioned it as a value, a product of ethics, partnerships, and foresight. And perhaps that is the most powerful lesson of all. In the past, pipelines defined empires. Today, values define influence. The country that builds with integrity, treats partners with fairness, and plans for long-term trust, not just short-term gain, will shape the future of global energy. Canada made its move, quietly, boldly, with purpose. Now, the rest of the world is paying attention. In 2025, Canada made a move that shook the very foundations of energy geopolitics, not with noise, but with strategy. For decades, Canada had played a supporting role in North America's energy economy. Its gas flowed south through American pipelines powering U.S. homes and industries. The arrangement was stable, predictable, and beneficial until it was not. Everything changed on June 30th, 2025. A ship called the Gaslog Glasgow left Kitimat, British Columbia, loaded with liquefied natural gas. It did not stop in Houston or Boston. It sailed east directly to Japan. For the first time in over 30 years, Canadian gas bypassed the United States entirely. This was not an accident. It was the result of a $40 billion investment in LNG Canada, a massive project built in silence. It liquefies gas using hydroelectric power, drastically reducing carbon emissions. The project was not just about exports, it was about independence. The United States responded with tariffs, but the contracts were already signed. Japan, China, and South Korea had all secured long-term deals with Canada. U.S. influence over Canadian energy was gone. The era of interdependence was over. This shift had immediate consequences. In the northeastern U.S., energy prices began to rise. American infrastructure was not ready to replace Canadian supply. Meanwhile, Canada was gaining recognition not just as a supplier, but as a leader in clean, ethical energy. Kitimat's LNG was different. It was green, reliable, and politically stable. Asian buyers noticed. In a world increasingly concerned about carbon emissions, Canadian gas became premium fuel. Canada's advantage was not just technical, it was cultural. The project included Indigenous equity, local employment, and transparent governance. Over 50,000 jobs were created. Billions in contracts were awarded to First Nations businesses. The message was clear. Canada was not just selling energy, it was exporting trust. Ironically, much of the technology used to build this system came from the United States. American companies developed the compressors and monitoring systems that now gave Canada the ESG edge. The lesson here is not just about pipelines or policy, it is about preparation. Canada built quietly. It planned long-term. It focused on values, not just volume. And it acted at the right time. While the U.S. was focused on short-term retaliation, Canada played the long game. It understood that global power was shifting from fossil quantity to carbon quality, from control to credibility. This new energy order rewards countries that build with integrity, respect their environment, and include their people. That is exactly what Canada did. And in doing so, it set a new standard. But the journey is not over. Canada still faces challenges. The second phase of Kitimat requires billions in investment. Environmental scrutiny is rising. Indigenous communities demand sustained equity. Other exporters are moving fast with cheaper, less regulated options. Canada's lead is strong, but it is not guaranteed. Still, the foundation is clear. Energy leadership in the 21st century is no longer about domination. It is about trust, consistency, and responsibility. Canada showed the world what is possible when a nation invests in clean power, transparent governance, and inclusive growth. And now the world is watching.